So, if you spend a lot of time reading propaganda or looking at propaganda, you start to realize that you can lie by what you say, but you can also lie by what you don't say. And this is a really interesting contrast. I'm going to show you three different articles. I'm going to show you one from Radio Free Europe, one from the president's office in Russia, and one from the Times of Israel. Now, it's not because I'm focused on Israel. That's not the point. This is just trying to show you how Russia acts, and you can extrapolate that to Israel, to Russia, to Ukraine, to the United States, however, but just watch how they're acting here. Okay, so this article, Netanyahu speaks to Putin, voices disapproval of Iranian ties. And here it says, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke to Russian President Vladimir Putin on December 10th and voiced displeasure with anti-Israel positions taken by Moscow's envoys at the UN. And Israeli statement said, now, Netanyahu also voiced, quote, robust disapproval of Russia's dangerous cooperation with Iran, the Israeli statement said. Okay, so that's a pretty simple summary of what happened in Radio Free Europe. That's just trying to cover the details of what they said. Here's how Russia said it. So I saw this. Now, again, in my feed, I have lots of things from all over, and you try to triangulate on different perspectives in order to get a clearer picture of what was said. You don't just say, well, clearly they said this, and just use that one source. You try to. So here's the president of Russia's website, and this is what they said about the same incident. Telephone conversation with Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. And so they're giving their summary of that description. The discussion focused on critical situation in the Palestine-Israeli conflict zone in particular, in the disastrous humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip. Vladimir Putin reaffirmed his principled position of rejecting and condemning terrorism in all its manifestations. Really. At the same time, it is of the essence to avoid such grave consequences for the civilian population while countering terrorist threats. Russia is ready to provide all possible assistance and alleviate the suffering of civilians and de escalate the conflict. In addition, the parties expressed mutual interest in further cooperation on the evacuation of Russian citizens and their families, as well as the release of Israelis held in Gaza. President Vladimir Putin and Benjamin Netanyahu agreed to continue contacts. Okay, so when you read that, it seems like they had two different discussions. There was no mention of anything about Iran or, hey, you're not treating Israel right, or anything along these lines. Putin is positioning himself in this phrase, or whoever's writing this is positioning themselves to make Putin and Russia look like these, oh, we're just trying to make sure that nothing bad happens to any civilians, or and that could have been part of the conversation. But this was a long way from Israel's take on this particular episode. Here's the Times of Israel. They're going to also give their take on what happened here. And what you'll see is that the Times of Israel, they're not seeing it quite the same way. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke with Russian leader Vladimir Putin for nearly an hour on Sunday. So first, you would get from this was a very short thing, not nearly an hour's length conversation. Criticizing Moscow's alliance with Iran and expressing dissatisfaction with its stance on Israel's war with Hamas. You wouldn't get any of that out of the Russian position paper either. Since war broke out on October 7th, Russia has regularly criticized Israel, including in the UN Security Council, while at the same time hosting leaders of the Hamas terror group in a development widely seen as an extension of its increasingly friendly ties with Iran. Yeah, I mean, there's that, but no mention of anything like that. The prime minister expressed his annoyance over anti-Israel stances by Russian representatives at the United Nations and other fora, the prime minister's office said in a statement. It added that Netanyahu expressed sharp criticism over the dangerous cooperation between Russia and Iran. But again, that's nowhere to be found here. So you can lie without actually lying. You just have to omit some of the what actually happened. And that's largely what seems to be happening here. Now, it is possible that Netanyahu's omitting parts of this in the Times of Israel or in their statement as well, but it's clear that Russia tends to do that all the time. And they're onto something here that the Russians do seem to spend a disproportionate amount of time with anti-Israel stances Like, so here's RT. Let's just look at the most recent RT articles. Okay, that's live news stream, or these are videos rather. Palestinian girl survives 4 days under rebel. Tel Aviv rallies for government action to free Hamas hostages. There was a pro-Israel one here. Equos refuses to lift Niger sanctions. Hundreds march in Milan to support of Palestine. Right? It tends to be disproportionate support for Palestine. Ka-52 helicopters carry out an attack. I think this would probably have been in Ukraine. And then we have what's probably the best article that I've seen, or best video that I've seen in RT in years. A daredevil cat leaps from a high pole during a rescue attempt. So just for kicks and giggles, we'll actually watch this. Okay, that's probably the most edifying thing that I've seen on RT in years. But again, if you just look at this, it's just like one thing about Gaza or support of Palestine after another. And that's why Netanyahu has a pretty not happy statement about what the reaction was with Putin, but you wouldn't have gotten that out of the official statement from Moscow. Okay, last thing that I want to share, and this is not, this isn't related to that, but I think it's really important. Right now, in the United States, they're going to be talking about the background of what has been happening here. The Republicans and Democrats are trying to work out some kind of agreement of both the Ukraine aid and the border wall. And while that's going on, I saw this particular meme with two Ukrainian soldiers in a trench. They said on the radio that people in the US and the EU are war weary. And I, I don't know why this just broke my heart. It really struck me when I'm thinking about what they're actually going through as opposed to, the war weary in the West. All right. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and the coffees. And thank you for being the kind of people that care about these war weary Ukrainian soldiers in the trench.